welcome to another edition of Contemporary Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff McIntyre, and today on this special show we have the usual special guest, Dr. Smuhlestein, in the house, and he has just come back from some journey in Somalia, and kind of was on sabbatical for a while, hence us not doing these podcasts for a while, but he's found some very interesting discoveries in terms of your common household cooking items, such as parsley, thyme, oregano, and rosemary, and how those are used in the medical field to expedite healing.
That's right, Jeff. Thanks for having me on the show today.
You bet. Let's just keep in mind, thanks to our sponsors today. We got Kanyohe Bakery supplying us with the custard pies, and also Aquarion, which is a betta fish food for all those modern suburban moms that have those little betta fish, because they're easy household pets to tame and for little children to play with. So I'd like to thank those sponsors today. All right, let's get started. So, Dr. Smuhlestein, I understand you went to Somalia. What kind of triggered all this?
You know, I think that was a typo on our transcript that I had sent over. I actually didn't just come back from Somalia. I came back from a small island off the coast of Maine called Smuhl.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I guess we'll just deal with that little change.
You know, some people in Maine, they've come to a conclusion that historically the reason that the island that I went to was called Smuhl was because it was just a dialectic version of the common word small. So I can understand your confusion with confusing it with Somalia.
Yeah, there's a little play on words there, that's for sure. All right, let's talk about this little island here. It's definitely not on a lot of people's radar, but could you kind of just, I don't know, go into some of the historical context of maybe colonization, and also, like, in terms of how it's affected the country now?
For sure. So this island of Smuhl, it was first made contact with the European world during the Mayflower times, of which we're all conversant. However, it doesn't show up in many history books because it caused certain negative consequences to the original Mayflower party as they were attempting to dock near Plymouth. Specifically because as they were looking for Plymouth, they ran into this island and they were caught off guard by the local fish and wildlife.
Oh, very interesting. So, so these people from the Mayflower, they inhabited the land, but then,
they actually didn't inhabit the land. They attempted to stop over there on their journey over. However, they encountered several dangerous conditions for their individual party.
And I know you had written a book about this in a book called Mayflower ?
Yeah, that's one of my earlier publications. It's since been out of print. You might be able to find it in certain local bookshops that sell out-of-print titles, but you're going to have a hard time finding out anything like a Amazon online store.
And it's kind of funny, my 16-year-old kid actually has a Kindle, and he has that book, actually.
That is remarkable. Do you know how he found a copy of that book?
I think it was leaked, actually. So.
Oh, man, I to be honest, I'm not very fond of that particular book. I've been trying to eliminate all the copies that I've found in circulation, but it's hard in this modern digital world.
Amen. Well, let's just kind of take a step back and let's go back to the whole this small island. All right, so let's talk about like the indigenous people there, and you have this fascination with parsley.
Yeah, so actually, the island has no indigenous inhabitants. There were several instances where the local Native American populations would stop over on this island for agricultural purposes. However, there is not good archaeological evidence that they ever made a sustained move to colonize the island. However, getting to the parsley, one of the main reasons for their stopover back in the day was this proliferation of parsley that we have along the coast of the island. The parsley grows out of small cracks in the rocks, and it seems to grow there naturally. It doesn't need any kind of gardening or cultivation, and rather seems to benefit from the cold and windy climate of this island.
And it's to my understanding that harvesting this is a pretty remarkable, because I mean it's pretty harsh conditions that you're going through, and also the landscape is pretty treacherous. I know, like, I heard something about, like, there's 60-year-old men with baskets on their heads, and they have all this rock climbing gear, and I don't know if those rumors are true, but I don't know. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
You know, those rumors, I'm sorry, are completely founded. There is rather a local group of very experienced climbers who make this effort to harvest the parsley. However, it's a very treacherous profession, and there's a high mortality rate among these climbers, with deaths often reaching the rate of 80 to 90% of the climbers reaching their end in this profession on the job. So it's not for the weak of heart. I'll say that much. There's also some interesting sociological occurrences that go on connected to the harvesting of the parsley. Also, some interesting ritual activities that I would be delighted to get into.
Okay, that's actually what I wanted to segue to next, is kind of the ritualistic components of this regular household island we use, but I mean, little do we know that it has some, customary and cultural and mystic, even, like, significances in it, and so let's talk about. I know that in your little writings you wrote about one of these, like, really interesting situations. Could we just go into that a little further?
That's right. It all started on one day in 1998. I was on a sabbatical in the area, and I was in a small fishing boat, and I came upon this island, and I was lucky to witness a ritual that goes back to ancient times involving the parsley. What I saw was a group of these men that were committed to this profession, gathered around the parsley, chanting in circles around these cracks in the rock that contain the parsley growth. And as they were chanting, they would pick the parsley one by one and then put it into their nasal cavities.
Interesting. With it being in their nasal cavities, like, what's the intention behind that?
I think it's very simple. They have come to this part of the ritual because of their love of the smell of parsley. When it really gets right down to it, as I've interviewed these individuals, most of them say that the reason that they're so committed to this profession is because of the very distinct smell of parsley. It almost has an addictive property for them, and they report altered states where they reach a kind of nirvanic bliss with these parsley rituals, and the the use of parsley in their nasal cavities. It's very interesting, and I think I'll devote most of my second half of my life to understanding this phenomenon.
Well, that's kind of funny. I mean, you're explaining this. I mean, it almost sounds like a hippie commune that you find in like Big Island, right? And so, I mean, there's probably a lot of people laughing at this, but it's real. It's very much real.
Well, I think this is a very serious topic, and any laughter, I think, is tantamount to bullying in this case, especially because we need to look at this with open eyes and open hearts and realize that some things that you might do on a daily basis might seem strange to the outside observer, whether it be your daily or your daily tasks of bathing and washing, or even simple things like tying your own shoes. I personally wear slip-ons, and I think that anyone that ties their shoes is a laughing stock. So I don't see why we should laugh at these individuals that have chosen to harvest parsley and insert it in their nasal cavity. I think it's a normal human occurrence, and we should accept it with all the graciousness that it deserves.
Definitely. Like, I totally would have to agree with you on that. I mean, I noticed too, looking at parsley containers, like in your spice cabinet, in very small print, it says, there's some weird symbols on there.
Yeah, well, this gets to the wider parsley proliferation of that we are all involved in the United States. You might not know it, but when you go to the supermarket, likely you are buying parsley that was harvested on the island of Samoa. And it's really extraordinary, actually, when you look at it, how much of our parsley comes back from one location. And it's because of this strict and very powerful conglomeration of these parsley harvesters, and they've really cornered the market, and you owe a debt to them every time you bite into that green goodness.
That's really interesting. And also, like, I mean, with all this mystical presence around this, parsley, and with this culture in Somal, I mean, there's been a couple instances where, like, back in 58 and 47, and even recently, in 2019, you have groups of protesters against, simply these kinds of methods of producing, or even like embellishing and harvesting parsley.
Sure, yeah. There's always going to be opposition to time-worn traditions of harvesting. You look at any agricultural profession, and there's going to be opposition to the traditional methods. But I think that's all the more reason why they should be preserved. I kind of want to pivot right here and talk a little bit about the ocean surrounding Somal, and if it's possible, I would love for my friend and expert Dr. Maple to speak on this topic, but I don't know if he's around. If he is, I would.
Hey, is he around?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we're gonna bring you closer to the mic here. I'm glad you're able to make it, Dr. Maple. I sent him a note earlier, and here he is in the flesh. He is a expert in the nautical arts, and here he is going to speak on the subject now. Take it away.
All right. Like I said, I'm Dr. Maple. My expertise really is in seaweeds, not as much as the terrestrial plants, but in this specific case, it has something to do with the parsley found on Somal. As you may have heard, there's normal parsley, and then there's Chinese parsley, which is actually cilantro, having a lot more pungent flavor. And the normal parsley is more used kind of like a garnish. But this parsley that's found on the island of Small is a little bit different. You see, the mystic or hallucinogenic properties that it gains, it's gained through cross-pollination with the surrounding seaweeds that grow in the waters in the main area of North America.
Yeah, so this might bring us to the question of why is it if this parsley proliferates throughout North America, even in our supermarkets, why is the normal American consumer not enjoying these hallucinogenic or mystical properties that this parsley is known to possess?
So what you're saying is that there's a lot more to this parsley stuff in terms of maybe mental health and stability, and that maybe we can cure things like schizophrenia and, I don't know, like OCD.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, Jeff, but I would say that there are properties that those that are familiar with the island of Samal are familiar with that we aren't seeing on the supermarket level. So my question to Dr. Maple is, why is it if these strands or strains of parsley are known for these strange medical properties and healing effects, why is it that we don't see it when they're at the supermarket? What happens to the parsley that it undergoes this change where we don't see these effects anymore?
Well, that's what makes the parsley from the island of Small so valuable when it's harvested in the proper way by that small group of enthusiasts that you were talking about. When it's not harvested in the right way and it's not preserved in the right way, it loses its properties. I think one of the biggest problems is that like a lot of things that are different, people are scared of them, and they're scared of the foreign cultures, foreign ideas, and ways of living. But this can really hold us back because, like we were saying, there's a lot of potential for the special properties this parsley has.
For sure, and based on what you just said, my honest best guess is it must be the preservation, because clearly this parsley is being harvested by these individuals who are dedicated to this craft. As I've said, they've cornered the market, so it must be in the preservation where it loses this potential for use. So that's something we ought to look into, and I'll continue to look into it with my studies.
We've talked about you mentioned the market value. Let's go into that. Okay, what is typically the market value for something like a 1 pound bag of parsley?
You know, it's interesting that in all of my research of parsley, I've never delved into the economic side, and that's something that for sure will animate my researches in the coming months and years. But as we all know, we can go to the supermarket and buy parsley quite cheap. So it might be a case of economic exploitation if I'm not mistaken, because these individuals that harvest the parsley go through such lengths to get it to us, and I don't think they're receiving near the amount of compensation that they deserve, especially due to the high mortality rate that we talked about earlier.
That's pretty staggering numbers too, from what I see. But did you want to add anything, Dr. Maple?
Well, as you were saying, the price of parsley is pretty negligible. And the people who harvest this parsley, they're doing their best to preserve it. They're doing it because it's their passion and it's their culture and it's something that they're dedicated to. And to them, it's a priceless item. So that's why they're willing to do it. And that's being exploited by the rest of us.
Of course, another case of exploitation. What can we expect? Well, anyways, to move on, I do want to thank you, Jeff, for having us on the show to talk about this maybe a little bit unpopular subject. But I do hope that at least so far that we've gained some insight into this component of all of our daily lives, and that next time we eat parsley, that we can consider where it came from, what it means, and what we can do with the parsley that we have.
And there you have it, folks. Next time you cook and look in your spice cabinet, look at what that common household item can do for you.
You know, and I would love to come back on the show and discuss cilantro in all of its
Or Chinese parsley.
or Chinese parsley, as our
That's right.
commentator has mentioned.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, it's always
Been an honor.
It's always a pleasure, Dr. Maypole. I'd love to hear more about your sailing exploits in the future.
Of course.
Well, that about wraps it up for time, but thank you for tuning into Contemporary Conversations with our special guests, Dr. Smuhlestein and Dr. Maple. We don't have quite enough time to go into more of the exploits in Parsley, but tune in tomorrow at around 6 p.m., and we will have a second segment of this show. Like I said, today's episode has been brought to you by Aquarium, betta fish food for your little betta fish at home, domesticated betta fish. But
And can I just say that I use aquarium myself, and I have found it to be the most hardy and sustaining of all betta fish foods.
thank you. And let us not forget our main sponsor, which is Kanyohei Bakery, supplying us with custard pies since 1776. All right, well, thank you very much, and hope to see you again.